The orbital object moving toward the lobe could have been any one of the 119 preserver artifacts already discovered in Federation space. But this obelisk was unlike any of the others in one major aspect. It was over 3 kilometers long and just under 1.5 kilometers across at its widest. Tiberius shook his head in disbelief.
An obelisk? Here? It must be a weapon.
Kirk kicked in the impulse engines, and the shuttle flew towards the obelisk. After only 10 minutes, the shuttle found the portal. Kirk watched as sensor returns. Absolutely no signals reflected back from whatever lay inside the opening, as if the only thing inside was an infinite black hole. Tiberius cautioned him.
Don't go in there, James. We have to. I think I finally figured out what this thing is, why it's here, and what the preservers are going to have it do.
Tiberius stared at Kirk with total bafflement.
What if you're wrong? Only one way to find out.
Kirk pitched the shuttle down, and nose first, it dropped towards the obelisk and the darkness within. In Captain McDonald's ready room, Picard forced himself to listen quietly as Commander Terrell, the science officer, explained the Ferengi presence. The Hawkins received a new optical planetary communications grid constructed by a Ferengi consortium. In return, the Hawkins allowed a second Ferengi consortium to use experimental techniques to map the planet's complete dilithium reserves. There was something to the arrangement that troubled Picard. What is this Ferengi experiment you mentioned? A Ferengi experiment in geomagnetism is to be conducted tomorrow. The planet Hawkin is notable for its many ion storms, which are disruptive to most forms of advanced communication. The experiment seeks to find out if their severity can be lessened by diverting some of their power through a large-scale dissipation system. In essence, a planetary lightning rod. Picard tensed with alarm. The Ferengi want to channel the energy of the ion storms into thousands of geosensors around the planet, and those geosensors are in direct contact with the planet's dilithium reserves? MacDonald had had enough. What is your concern, Captain? Dilithium is unstable. Terrell objected. Certainly not under these conditions. But you don't have the slightest idea what the real conditions are. MacDonald interrupted. Captain Picard, if this was a dangerous event, then why did Starfleet send me to help with the experiment? Picard wasn't certain he had heard her properly. How are you supposed to help? Terrell looked at him quizzically. Tomorrow we plan to induce ion storm formation by using our phasers to ionize specific portions of the Hawkin atmosphere in conjunction with Damon Baryan's ship. Suddenly, understanding flooded through Picard. They're using you to light the fuse. MacDonald's voice became instantly formal. This meeting is over, Captain. I suggest you take your concerns to Starfleet Command. There's nothing you can do here. Picard stood his ground. Just watch me. Within the mirror universe, the Lowell shuddered as it passed through the obelisk's portal. Kirk switched on the navigation searchlights. Now, clearly illuminated, the interior of the obelisk revealed a docking chamber. The Lowell continued on its course, heading for what appeared would be a slow collision with the near wall. But the shuttle's proximity alarm didn't sound. Kirk shut down the shuttle's engines and used maneuvering thrusters to come to a relative stop in the center of the docking chamber. Then the shuttle changed its orientation and began to move toward one of the walls as if controlled by a tractor beam. Through the viewports, Kirk saw the portal they had entered through pass by. Hawkin wasn't visible through it, only stars, and the patterns were unfamiliar to him. Kirk told Tiberius,
"We're not inside the obelisk."
Just then the shuttle made contact with a solid surface which, according to its sensors, wasn't there. At once, Kirk ran an atmospheric analysis. It registered a vacuum outside the shuttle. Kirk thought for a moment.
Tiberius, use your tricorder on me.
Tiberius pointed the device at Kirk, grinned.
You'll be glad to know you have no life signs.
Kirk punched the rear hatch control. Nothing. No hiss of venting air, no pressure alarm. The air was stale, it was metallic, but it was air with enough oxygen to support life. Tiberius looked out through the open hatch.
James, do you think they know we're here?
Kirk had no doubts.
I think they know everything.
Riker looked at Picard in astonishment.
You want a plan of attack against the Pathfinder?
I don't see what choice she leaves me, Will. Something's going to happen here in the next 14 hours. The psychohistorians say it's going to be the end of the universe. I don't see how that's possible, but at the very least, I do believe we're looking at the potential destruction of Vulcan, and I will not accept that. If MacDonald doesn't have the judgment to hold back and contact Starfleet Command so we can study this problem in depth, then I intend to force her to do so by disabling the Pathfinder. The officers were interrupted by an urgent shout from Zephram Sloan.
Sir! 2 ships powering up in the space dock. Receiving a priority hail from the Ferengi vessel.
A furious Ferengi in a pale green headskirt appeared on the viewer. Picard greeted him politely.
Damon Baryon, I presume.
Captain Picard, operating under the full authority of Ferengi Alliance, I demand that you leave Vulcan space at once. Your presence here serves no profitable purpose.
Damon, I was not aware that the Ferengi Alliance had any authority in the sovereign space of another world. But if Captain MacDonald has explained my concerns about the scheduled experiment, then you understand that I have no wish to stop it, only to delay it until further study can be undertaken. The Ferengi drew back in horror.
Further study? So the Federation can learn our trade secrets? Steal our advantage? Well, not this time, human. Captain Picard, you have 5 minutes to leave the system.
Then Baryon made a sharp gesture, and his transmission ended. Sloan reported to Picard.
The Ferengi's putting weapons on standby.
Mr. Sloan, what's the Pathfinder status?
We're being hailed, sir.
At Picard's command, Captain MacDonald appeared on the main viewer.
Captain MacDonald, this situation is getting out of hand.
I know, Captain. I followed that last exchange. If you do make any attempt to intervene, Damon Baryon does have authority to defend Ferengi assets. Picard was almost speechless. There are 2 of us here, Captain, the Enterprise and the Pathfinder. Not even Damon Baryon would be foolish enough to engage us both. MacDonald looked pained. That's just it, Captain. The Pathfinder is present in the system under express Starfleet orders to aid our allies, the Ferengi and the Vulcans. You have no authority here. The Ferengi do. If you act against them, there is an extremely good chance that the already strained political climate of Ferenginar will swing against the Federation completely. I am not willing to risk that happening. Pathfinder out. Sloan called from the station.
Pathfinder has raised her shields. Both vessels are powering weapons.
Riker stepped to Picard's side.
What are your orders, Captain?
Picard had no answer. Kirk took his first step from the hatch ramp onto the surface of the docking chamber. Tiberius stepped off ramp, stood beside him.
I know why you brought me here. What's the purpose of the obelisk?
Kirk saw a small opening in one of the silver-green walls 20 meters away. He began walking toward it. Tiberius walked beside him. It's a wedge. I think Vulcan is the reason why our 2 universes have remained connected. As they approached the wall, Kirk saw that the small opening he had seen led into a curved corridor. Kirk continued. It was the ion storms. Maybe it had something to do with all the dilithium on the planet, too. But those storms weakened the field density between the 2 universes. Then, when we both used our transporters at the same instant, we punched a hole from one side to another. Somehow, that made a permanent connection that's bound your universe and mine together ever since. They paused by the opening to the corridor beyond. Tiberius held his hands up to the sides of his face, shielding his eyes from the dim light of the shuttle searchlights behind them. "There's another light source down there." Kirk saw the pale glow and started forward. Tiberius did not object to him going first. "So you think this giant obelisk is going to break that connection?" But Kirk did not reply. After a single step into the corridor, they were in another large chamber already. Tiberius turned to Kirk. "A transporter alcove?" Kirk nodded. "Either that, or the preservers know something about topography we don't." Kirk studied the new, more expansive chamber. Tiberius looked at the pillars of silver-green phase transition compound, angled out from the floor and stretched halfway to the distant ceiling. "You were saying this was a wedge, James? To sever the universes?" "Yes, I think so. Permanently." Tiberius mulled over Kirk's answer. "I don't know if I like the idea of a permanent separation. It's not as if we have a choice. But in a sense, separating our universes mean the psychohistorians were right in a way. A universe will be cut off from us forever. I suppose that could be interpreted as a universe ending. So when do you suppose they'll hammer the wedge through whatever's connecting us?" Kirk started to think through the possibilities. "Soon, I think. It probably depends on—" "Behind you, Tiberius." Tiberius turned slowly. There were things moving in the shadows between the pillars. They were coming closer. On the bridge of the Enterprise, Picard activated the full communications channel and saw an unmoved Christine McDonald on the view screen.
Captain Picard, your time is now up.
"Captain McDonald, I am willing to leave the Halkin system as you requested. However, I ask that you allow me to remain for another 90 minutes in order to retrieve a shuttlecraft that is currently off the ship." McDonald looked off-screen.
My science officer informs me no shuttles have left the Enterprise while she's been in orbit.
"We beamed the shuttlecraft into the mirror universe. It will take us some time to retrieve it." And then, whatever else Picard had been about to say was lost as Damon Baryan opened fire on the unprotected Enterprise. "Shields!" Picard glanced over at Riker. "Continue with the plans for an attack on the Pathfinder, and build an initial attack on the Ferengi ship while you're at it."
I take it we're not leaving, sir.
"Oh, we'll leave, but not before we've crippled those two ships so badly they'll have to cancel the experiment." The shadows came closer. Discontinuous planes of black and gray. Kirk didn't move. Tiberius jumped sideways, lifted his arms in a fighting stance. One shadow zigzagged toward the intersection of three shafts of light on the floor. The shadow darted through the light. But even in the light, it remained a shadow. The significance was not lost on Tiberius. "We're leaving." Kirk shook him off. "Not till we know if those are the preservers." Suddenly, two shadows unfolded from a grouping of others. Kirk stared at them carefully. They were humanoid. He was sure of that. Just past them, he saw the others gathered in front of the far opening. He held out his hands. They knew so much about humans, they had to know it was a gesture of greeting. One of the shadows stepped forward. The creature manifested arms and held out both hands to him. As if a large gemstone were taking shape in a transporter beam, the creature's face began to coalesce in a pattern of crystal facets, offering a glimpse of what lay within. And seeing what lay within, Kirk felt the hair on his arms bristle. "Spock?" Suddenly a hand was on his shoulder, and Kirk stumbled back, pulled by Tiberius. "We're going back. I need you to take me back. Didn't you see what those things were?" Kirk looked at his counterpart, saw recognition in his eyes, saw fear. "What did you see?" "They're Cardassians." "Tiberius, I saw a Vulcan. Maybe we can make contact with them." Tiberius's fist came out of nowhere, and Kirk fell back to the hard floor in mid-word. "I swear I'll leave pieces of you behind unless you come with me now." Kirk's fist drove upward and caught Tiberius on the jaw, sending him to the floor. "Now you listen. Those shadows, Whatever we think they are, they're not interested in coming after you or me. They're only interested in keeping us from going through that opening beyond them. Then here's a suggestion, James. Let's not go through that other opening. Tiberius, think for once. You saw Cardassians and Klingons. They're your enemies. I saw Vulcan. That's a friend. Maybe I can go through. You can't. And before Tiberius could reply, Kirk turned and ran toward the far opening. Kirk looked back. Tiberius, go to the shuttle. More shadows had appeared to either side of the chamber, moving toward Tiberius. Kirk shouted, Tiberius, they're after you! Run! Tiberius spun around and rushed back toward the first chamber. Kirk turned back to the second opening. 3 shadows flickered before him. Kirk held out his hands again in greeting. One by one, the 3 shadows coalesced, transformed, and did the same. Then... Yes, that's my name, Jim. Now a sensation engulfed him, the warmth of familiarity. Kirk held his arms out wide, embracing the shadows, and their formless bodies flowed around him. The shadows parted, revealing the second opening. He moved through it, and a single footstep brought him into another cavern. Jim. There was something waiting for him in the center of the chamber. In a way, he had almost expected it. In a way, he almost felt as if he had come home. The shadows melted from Kirk as he walked back into the lights of the second chamber. All that he had seen in that third and final chamber etched forever in his mind. He saw the first opening before him, stepped into it, and was in the docking chamber at once. He saw the Percival Lowell in the center of the dark chamber, searchlights blazing. Then he heard Tiberius screaming. Kirk ran towards the shuttlecraft, closing in on the location of the screams, then swung around the shuttle's far side to find Tiberius caught by the shadows. For a moment, Kirk hesitated. Tiberius had been right. Kirk had been willing to use his counterpart in any way he could to attract the attention of the preservers. In the end, that had been unnecessary. This enormous obelisk was not what Kirk thought it might be. What had been waiting in the final chamber had been waiting for Kirk. Tiberius was not needed. Tiberius served no purpose. Tiberius was nothing more than a random error which deserved to be deleted. A monster who had destroyed worlds and civilizations. It would be so simple to abandon Tiberius, Kirk knew. But to do so would be to abandon his own responsibility. Because of who he was and what he believed, there was only one thing James T. Kirk could do. He ran to fight for Tiberius. Then the shadows attacked Kirk as well. Shifting fragments of hands and fingers clawed at him. Kirk found one full hand and grabbed its wrist, and with that grip made the shadow solid. The facets and planes of its face coalesced, made real by Kirk's contact with it, and Kirk saw with horror that the shadows surrounding Tiberius were not those of his enemies. Pavel Chekhov, face pale and eyes sunken, a living corpse who had crawled from the agony booth where Tiberius had left him a century ago, grasped and clawed for Kirk as if to drag him down into the pit. Kirk lashed out, saw the mirrored Chekhov's face splinter into a cloud of spinning shards. A young Leonard McCoy, rope burns on his neck, tore at Tiberius's clothes. Kirk shouted, "Tiberius, run!" Tiberius gibbered and cried and kicked and hit, and Kirk pushed him away from the shadows, driving him toward the shuttlecraft. Then Kirk heaved Tiberius into the shuttle's open hatch, ran up the shuttle's ramp, punched the hatch controls, started the auto-launch sequence. Kirk leapt into the pilot's seat. The viewports began to cloud and darken in a sea of shadows that still sought Tiberius. But Kirk had located the opening that led to freedom and the stars, and he blasted for it. The Lowell shuddered and escaped the docking chamber, and then suddenly the stars jumped and became the ones Kirk remembered surrounding the mirror Halcyon. James, why did you save me? Kirk put his hand on the callback signal control and punched in his authentication code. The day you can understand the answer is the day you won't have to ask the question. Kirk looked up at Picard and the others who were gathered around the diagnostic bed in the sick bay. There was another Guardian. Picard could see how exhausted Kirk was, but he had to ask, "Do you mean another Guardian of Forever?" Kirk nodded. Then, before anyone could ask him more questions, Telani interrupted. "I don't know what that is. The Guardian of Forever?" Spock answered. "In effect, it is a time portal, sentient, capable of displaying images from the past and of allowing travel to other times." Spock turned to Kirk. "Did the Guardian in the obelisk interact with you?" "It didn't speak to me, but it did show me the past, all from the Halkan perspective. I saw our first visit here, Spock, the crossover, everything that happened on Tiberius's Enterprise. The Guardian kept showing me Halkan in the mirror universe. I saw the giant obelisk appear in orbit of Halkan. I saw our shuttlecraft enter it. I saw what the obelisk is meant to do. I saw Halkan destroyed, and then it was as if blackness expanded in a sphere and the obelisk was gone, and the Guardian showed nothing more, as if time had ended." Picard puzzled over the possible meaning of those images. "I don't understand how a runaway dilithium reaction could be triggered on—" Spock interrupted. "The obelisk. It is staggering. In our universe, the Ferengi plan to direct a massive energy discharge into Halkan's dilithium reserves. Damage will be minimal. But if at that time, in the mirror universe, the obelisk creates a transporter beam effect to open a doorway between the two universes, as happened before, the dilithium reserves of our Halkan will cross over to occupy the same dimensional coordinates as the reserves left on the mirror Halkan. The dimensional overlap that will occur when the dilithium reserves of two universes are forced to share the same even dimensional coordinates in one universe will create regions of infinite density." Telani voiced her concern. "You mean a singularity? Like a black hole?" Spock shook his head. "No, nothing like a black hole, but exactly like the vacuum fluctuations from which the universe was born." Telani sighed with impatience. "Will someone please tell me what you're all talking about?" Kirk reached out to hold her hands. "Telani, the mirror Halkan will become the site of a subspace explosion equal in intensity to the Big Bang. A new universe will be born, and in seconds will inflate to a size larger than Federation space. If it's a new universe, what happens to the one that's already there?" "Erased. The new universe continues to expand at the speed of light in all directions, eventually destroying the entire mirror universe like a parasite from within." Telani looked at the others in sickbay. "What happens to our universe?" Spock raised an eyebrow. "Nothing. The vacuum fluctuation will forever shut the doorway connecting us. There will not even be any harm done to the Halkan of our universe." "But James, the preservers are going to wipe out an entire universe of living beings. We can't let that happen." Kirk looked to Picard. "Jean-Luc, we won't let that happen, will we?" "No, Jim, we won't." But Data was concerned. "Captain, I feel I must point out that the preservers are a formidable enemy to engage." "Fortunately, Data, we will not have to engage the preservers. Only the Pathfinder and Damon Baryan's ship." Telani turned to Picard. "But Christine will understand, won't she? She'll support you." Picard felt everyone's eyes upon him. "At this point, she is not inclined to trust me. I'm not certain if I can convince her to stand down." Telani's eyes flashed, and Picard saw in her the fire that he knew had first drawn Kirk to her. "Then I can convince her. I'm a negotiator, Jean-Luc. I brought Shal into the Federation." Picard wasn't convinced. "Captain MacDonald is a starship captain. She's also a woman. I know her. I've worked with her." She glanced at her husband. "And we have a great many things in common." Picard felt as if he was stepping into empty air. One mistake, one miscalculation, and a universe would die in an instant. He looked at Telani. "All right. Our goal is simply to have MacDonald stop the experiment long enough to contact Starfleet Command for further orders. You are not trying to change her mind, only delay her decision." Telani nodded confidently. "I can do that." Data asked Picard, "What about Damon Baryan?" "In a one-to-one fight, his ship is no match for the Enterprise." He turned to Telani. I'll arrange a communications link from the conference room. No. I need to see her face to face. Kirk put his arm around Telani's shoulders. She can do it, Jean-Luc. Jim, if Telani does go to the Pathfinder and is not successful, I will have to fire on that ship. Telani turned to her husband. I will be successful, James. You know I will. In the main transporter room of the Enterprise, Kirk smiled at Telani, ran a light finger over the subtle ridges of her forehead. On a sudden impulse, he hugged her. James, I'll be fine. Chris is a reasonable woman. She reminds me of you. Kirk smiled and then told her, there's so much I want to say to you, but never enough time. There will be, for the three of us. Kirk understood. Their lives together would go forward from the present with their child, their Joseph. And somehow, Kirk promised himself, with Telani's help, he would learn to accept his child. Data entered the transporter room and gave a small pad to Telani. Telani frowned. A code. Data nodded. For the Pathfinder. If it becomes necessary, you will be able to use this code to set a new non-random modulation pattern for the Pathfinder's shields, permitting us to use pinpoint phaser hits to disable the Pathfinder's weapon systems without collateral damage. Telani gave the pad back to Data. And you don't think the Betazoid is going to pluck that fact from my mind? Counselor Troy assures me that if you do not think about remodulating the shields until the moment you decide such an action is necessary, it should escape the Betazoid's notice. Telani stepped up on the transporter pad. Back in an hour, James. When Kirk returned to the Enterprise bridge, he walked over to his friend at the auxiliary science station. Spock. But the Vulcan's first words were anything but reassuring. The situation is worse than I anticipated, Jim. How much worse? Initiation of the ionization event that will trigger the dilithium reaction in the mirror universe will only require the firepower of one ship, either the buyout or the Pathfinder. So, Spock, if anything happens, we'll have to stop both of them, not just one. I've already informed Captain Picard. Kirk sighed. Telani isn't going to be able to convince McDonald to stand down, is she? McDonald believes she's right. We believe we're right. Neither one of us will back down. What happens then, Spock? There's only one possible outcome, Jim. Tragedy. On the bridge of the Pathfinder, MacDonald listened impatiently to Telani. I'm sorry, you haven't convinced me. James was gone for more than an hour in the mirror universe, inside a giant alien artifact, exposed to who knows what kind of illusions, maybe even mind control. Telani was silent for a moment, but it was clear to all present that strong, conflicting emotions were at war in her. Finally, she asked, would you at least talk to James? MacDonald was blunt. We've had our talk. My mind hasn't changed. Telani remained calm. Talk to James. MacDonald glared at Telani for a long moment, then finally said with profound annoyance, Hail the Enterprise, put Kirk on. Kirk moved in front of Picard, Riker, and Troy to face MacDonald on the viewer. Captain Kirk, I cannot allow you to have me act against my orders to the detriment of the Federation. Kirk turned his attention from MacDonald to Telani. Telani, is that the captain's decision? But before Telani could reply, the Betazoid Lieutenant Darna was on his feet shouting,
Captain, I can see it in her thought. She knows how to disable our shields.
Commander Terrell leapt from her chair to deliver a nerve pinch, and MacDonald ran for the phaser storage locker. Telani shoved the navigator to the side with Romulan speed and tapped in a code sequence. MacDonald aimed a phaser at Telani, but she was too late. The Pathfinder was engulfed by destruction. A On the Enterprise bridge, Kirk spun to face Picard.
Stop firing!
Sloan cried from security.
That wasn't us, Captain. It's the Ferengi.
Picard gave the order. Target the Ferengi and fire! Data looked up from his station.
Sir, the Pathfinder is going to collide with the space dock.
All Kirk could do was whisper Telani's name as the battle raged without logic. The crab-shaped Ferengi ship nosed up, streaked back behind the space dock, let fly with 2 flights of torpedoes. One flight for the Enterprise to drain her shields, the other struck the Pathfinder's unprotected port nacelle and turned it into plasma. The Ferengi ship launched another barrage of phaser fire, then dropped beneath the Enterprise and struck the space dock. It erupted into a cloud of debris and disintegrating phased matter. As the Enterprise and the Pathfinder both were swallowed by fire, the Ferengi ship made its escape. Smoke filled the Pathfinder's bridge. So did the deafening assault of alarms, the whimpers, the screams of the wounded. Christine MacDonald stood in the ruins of her command, fists at her side, blood streaking her face. Get me phasers. On the viewer, in place of the space dock, was a fiery cloud of debris, slowly dispersing to reveal the Enterprise listing. MacDonald shouted, "Target that bastard's bridge! Fire!" The viewer shifted as the hazy image of Picard appeared.
Pathfinder, break off your attack. It was the buyout that fired.
MacDonald jabbed her finger at the screen. "Your spy compromised our shields. Fire torpedoes!" Then Telani rose from the smoke-covered deck. "Chris, no. Reprogramming the shields was a last resort. The Enterprise was only going to target your weapons. You have to stop this." MacDonald wiped blood from her face. "Plot and intercept and stop that ship. Ram it if you have to." And then the ship computer made an announcement.
Warp core breach in progress. Detonation in 30 seconds.
On the Enterprise, the navigator announced to Picard, "We'll intercept the Ferengi vessel in 3 minutes." Kirk waved smoke from his face as the fire-fighting sprays hissed, and he watched the battered Pathfinder slide from the viewer. He turned to Sloan. "What's the status of MacDonald's ship?"
Scanning, sir. She's lost her port nacelle. Main power couplings are... She's got a warp core breach.
Kirk spun to Picard. "We've got to go back." "Jim, we can't. We have to stop the buyout, and we can't do both. We're only one ship." Kirk reached for another option. He had it. "Jean-Luc, detach the primary hull." Picard raised his voice so all could hear. "This is the captain. All hands brace for emergency hull separation. On my mark, emergency point-to-point transport from the bridge to the battle bridge. For Picard, Riker, Data, Troy." Picard stepped back. "Jim, this is your ship now. Bonne chance, mon ami."
Attention. Hull separation commencing.
Picard gave a final order. "Lieutenant Moran, as soon as the primary is free, you will set course for the Pathfinder at maximum speed. Captain Kirk has the con. Riker, Data, Troy, prepare for transport." Mbenga slapped her spray hypo against her captain's neck. Hunched over the Pathfinder's navigation console, MacDonald coughed and wheezed, then pushed her physician away. Mbenga looked around. There was no one else conscious on the bridge. "We have to abandon ship, Captain." "Give the order." MacDonald glared at her. "All safeties are on. We can't launch the pods." MacDonald's hands were already flying over the console. "But we can land." Spock looked up from his station on the Enterprise bridge. The Pathfinder is dropping into the atmosphere. Whoever is at the helm is attempting to land. Kirk looked back at his friend. "Can it do that?" "With the damage that ship has taken, it will not survive re-entry." Kirk turned to Sloan. "We have to make contact with whoever's flying that ship."
Channel opening. On screen.
Kirk could see MacDonald at the helm. Mbenga beside her. No one else. "Captain MacDonald!"
Go to hell, Kirk.
Kirk heard the senseless paranoia consuming her. "Your ship won't survive re-entry. Pull up. We'll beam off your crew."
I'll survive, and I'll see you in prison for treason.
Then she cut off transmission. Kirk hit a control. "Transport. Punch through the Pathfinder shields. Begin transport at will. Any life sign you can lock onto." Then Spock was beside him. "It would not be wise to transport the captain while she's flying the ship." Kirk immediately added a qualification. "Leave the bridge crew where they are for now." Kirk looked at Spock. "How long can McDonald hold that ship together?" "Until she reaches the upper atmosphere, no more than 5 minutes." "How long to beam out the crew?" 10 minutes, maybe a bit more." Kirk turned to the helmsman. "Rig for atmospheric entry. We're going to match Pathfinder's descent until we can get our shields around her." Fire streamed from the edges of the Pathfinder as the ravaged ship dropped lower into the atmosphere of Halkan. 1,000 kilometers away, a second trail of fire appeared. Arced in on an intercept course, gained speed. Kirk's Enterprise. The hulls of both ships began to shudder, buffeted by air rapidly thickening around them. Kirk knew that if he held this speed and angle too long, it would mean neither ship would survive. But if his gamble worked, only one of them would have to. Picard stood in the middle of the battle bridge of the Enterprise, behind Data at navigation, Riker at weapons. Riker announced, "The Ferengi is powering his phasers." Picard smiled with grim satisfaction. As long as Baryan was firing at the Enterprise, he couldn't initiate atmospheric ionization. "Return fire!" Above Halkan, the buyout changed orbits, shifted aim. Phasers blazing, the two ships closed on a direct collision heading that neither could survive. "Commander Data, set your own course. I want to see you peel the paint off his hull." The bridge of McDonald's Pathfinder leapt and groaned without let-up. Christine McDonald was flying by instruments alone. But even Mbenga could feel the ship breaking up all around them. "What's happening?" Startled, Mbenga wheeled about to see Telani pull herself up from the deck. "Chris is trying to land us, but we're breaking up." Immediately, Telani was at McDonald's side, in an auxiliary chair, reaching for the tactical controls. "Get away from those, Telani." "I can help you, Chris. You're losing control. There's too much damage for aerodynamic flight." "So what can you do about it?" Telani's hands moved swiftly over the adjoining consoles. "I'm going to reshape what's left of these shields for aerodynamic lift, just like orbital skydiving." McDonald muttered, "Stupid sport." "You should try it, Chris. You look like you could use a little more excitement in your life." Christine McDonald started to laugh. Telani joined her, and so did Mbenga, until the sound of laughter on the Pathfinder's dying bridge was louder than all the alarms. The helmsman called out on the Enterprise bridge. "Captain Kirk, the Pathfinder's altering her trajectory. She's adjusted her shields for lift." Kirk turned to Spock. "How are we going to do this, Spock?" The Vulcan gravely studied the flight graph on his screen. "There is a chance. She will now stay aloft long enough for us to beam everyone off. We already have 63 crew members aboard. 4 more minutes is all we'll need." Picard's Enterprise roared past the buyout in a final flash of light. The buyout spun like a top on the battle viewer. Picard grinned as he pictured Damon Baryan and his crew pinned against the bulkheads, their sensitive Ferengi ears being spun into a maelstrom of nausea. But then a whip-like phaser beam shot out from the spinning Ferengi ship. Then another, cutting through space in every direction. Data reported, "Random fire, sir, but all he needs is one to hit the atmosphere long enough to cause ionization, and he'll trigger the discharge." Picard took no pleasure in his next command. "Destroy that ship now." From the buyout, a phaser beam sliced down through the atmosphere of Halkan, creating a fine tunnel of ionized gas that flashed lightning-like tendrils of energy to other regions in the sky already charged with natural ionization. Only 1 second separated the universe that would die from the one that would survive. Then 1/2 second. Then the Starship Enterprise blew the leveraged buyout into atoms and the phaser beams stopped. The regions of ionization lost their charges slowly in the air. The dilithium remained undisturbed. A universe had been saved.
Kirk's Pathfinder. Come in, Pathfinder. Spock says you have less than 2 minutes before atmospheric stresses tear you apart.
McDonald didn't look up from her controls.
I told you to go to hell, Kirk.
James, I apologize for my co-pilot.
Delani, I see you're giving your co-pilot a lesson in orbital skydiving.
Not for much longer, James. These shields are running off batteries. They won't last to get us down.
They don't have to. We've beamed off 111 crew. The last 5 life signs we can read on the ship are all on the bridge.
McDonald vented her anger in a string of Tellarite invective, but Kirk cut her off.
Delani, listen carefully. The strongest shields are around the bridge. We need to be able to get a transporter beam through them.
James, if I drop the shields, we'll lose lift and structural integrity.
Delani, Spock here. If you open up a shield fluctuation at the medial overlap perimeter, we will be able to beam off the rest of you. Open the shields for 3 seconds with each fluctuation.
M'Benga understood what the plan was. So did Telani. You're going to beam us off one at a time? M'Benga also saw the flaw in the plan, and from the quick look Telani and McDonald exchanged, she knew they saw it too. McDonald called out, "Get the injured off first." M'Benga scrambled to Commander Terrell's unconscious form. She tapped the Vulcan communicator. "Here's the first lock signal," Telani said to the Enterprise, "opening shields." With the momentary loss of the shields that protected her and held her aloft, the Pathfinder became nothing more than a jagged piece of debris. Spock's voice came over the speakers.
First transport confirmed, standing by for next opening.
M'Benga made her way to Pini. The communications officer was on the deck, also unconscious. She too was beamed off. Then McDonald ordered M'Benga to beam off. M'Benga stepped back, tapped her comm badge. "Here's the signal." On the Enterprise bridge, Kirk's eyes were locked on the viewer when he heard the transporter chief announce,
"We've got the third one."
Spock gave the countdown. 30 seconds to loss of Pathfinder's structural integrity. Kirk looked at Spock. They're both flying that ship. We're going to have to pull them both off at the same time. Jim, we cannot. They would have to drop all shields, and the ship would not last long enough for us to lock onto either of them. Kirk felt his chest tightening. Who do we pull out first, Spock? Telani. Left on her own, she cannot fly the ship. But Captain McDonald might be able to reestablish the shields long enough to keep the ship together for a second beam-out attempt. Kirk exhaled in gratitude. It wasn't his decision. Telani, Chris, Spock says we have to pull Telani out first. Chris, you have to reestablish the shields as soon as she's away. No transmission came back. Chris, Telani, acknowledge. Finally, Telani transmitted.
Acknowledged. James, here's the signal. Stand by for the opening.
The transporter chief announced.
"We've got the fourth one." Sloan shouted, "She's out of control!"
On the viewer, Kirk saw the Pathfinder begin to roll. Kirk shouted, "Chris, use the shields to bring the nose up, then drop them. We can still get you, Chris." But it was Telani who transmitted.
"You've already got Chris."
Kirk's heart stopped. "No! You were supposed to beam out."
Chris could never handle the shields, James. She's an amateur in orbital skydiving. She never played like we have.
Spock, lock onto her. Sloan shouted,
"Captain! Pathfinder is breaking up!"
On the viewer, huge gouts of friction-fueled flame shot off the violently rolling ship as it lost all its aerodynamic stability. "Telani, drop the shields!" Spock confirmed. "We have a lock." Then Kirk heard Taylani say,
"Dropping shields, James. Here's the signal. Tell Chris I'm sorry I slugged her, and I'll see you."
The skies of Hulkin consumed the dying starship in the final wall of fire. The Pathfinder burst like a comet's tail, 1,000 burning sparks spreading in a graceful, glittering cascade of light. Kirk felt the bridge of the Enterprise spin around him, but knew it was an illusion. Because nothing could move in this entire universe until he heard the transporter chief's report. He willed that voice to come over the speakers. He held up his hands as if to grasp those words from the air.
This is the Chief. We do not confirm the log. We do not confirm transport. I'm sorry, Bridge. We lost her.
Kirk couldn't speak. Couldn't stand. Stumbled back, knees buckling. Spock caught him. Kirk looked at his friend, searching for one last chance, one last victory against the death that stalked him. But he knew the truth when he saw tears in the Vulcan's eyes. James T. Kirk had saved the universe, but he had not been able to save his wife. Dawn came again to Hulkin, to the blood-red plain where Taylani's journey had ended. But its light meant nothing to Kirk. The remains of his life were in the scattered debris, the small fires that still burned in a random pattern out to the horizon. Pieces that could never again be reassembled, put right. Spock walked over to him. "Jim, there is nothing more we can do here. The Sovereign will be here soon. We will have to speak with Admiral Radisson." Spock had already explained to Starfleet that the geosensor system must be disassembled at once. A permanent Starfleet installation must be put in place on Hulkin, so this could not happen again. Kirk looked up into the brightening lavender sky, trying to accept that the business of the galaxy must and would continue. Tiberius looked down at Kirk. "Come with me." Kirk looked up angered. Tiberius shrugged as if sensing the futility of repeating his request and stepped away. Then Captain Radisson stood before him. "You seem surprised by his offer." Kirk stared at her, at this latest version of the captain of Project Sign. Her skin was black now, like Sloane from the Enterprise. "Is there no justice for him?" Radisson looked away from Kirk, down the low rise to the small village in the clearing below. She had made her ready room into a simulation of some place on Earth. "Define justice, Captain Kirk. Is it punishment?" Kirk looked over to his counterpart, standing away from them in the light of the moon. "He's destroyed worlds. His legacy is the enslavement of humans and Vulcans in his universe. And if we kept them here, would those worlds be restored?" Kirk was about to snap out something about vengeance, but Tiberius spoke first. "I'm going to change things, James." Kirk wanted to laugh. "How can anyone believe you?" Radisson gazed up at the sky, the river of stars that flowed through the night. "We're not sending him back by himself. You knew Starfleet had committed to supporting the Vulcan resistance. There's a Sovereign-class starship at Starbase 25 Alpha just doing nothing. The NX-1701. And there's an experienced crew in custody who would like nothing better than to be back in space." Kirk didn't believe what he had heard. "Intendant Picard's crew? You're sending them all back?" "Under the command of Intendant Spock." Tiberius strolled back to stand beside Kirk. "Isn't that what you wanted from the very beginning, James? Spock in command of the ISS Enterprise? A man with a vision, leading the revolution, and you would serve him, Tiberius? Like you, James, I will do what I must do to make up for the past. And do you really want to know what the first thing I'm going to do will be?" Kirk waited. I'm going to the chow of my universe, James. I'm going to see if, against all odds, there's a Talani there for me. What could you know about love? Everything you do. Now. Radisson's eyes flicked up to the sky again, then back to her guests. In the end, Captain Kirk, it's not your decision to make. That's why Project Sign exists. There are terrors out there you can't imagine, but we can, and we do. And the reason we keep our secrets is so all the rest of you can sleep at night and believe there will be a better world to wake up to tomorrow. Kirk was suddenly tired of mysteries and duplicity and deceit. Who are you, really? Radisson smiled enigmatically. You've seen me as I really am. Not all of us were put here by Galen's ancestral species, Captain. Not all life is as you know it. Tiberius pointed to the stars. Here they come. Kirk looked up and saw a flash of blue. He looked at Radisson. Who's coming? And where is this place? A missile complex in Montana. Radisson smiled. End program. And then Montana became the elegantly curved and sculpted ready room on the flagship of the Project Sign Task Force, the USS Heisenberg. Tiberius turned to Radisson. Why disasters? James, a tsunami. Riker, a terrorist attack. And me, first contact. Perhaps Captain Kirk could answer that. Kirk was confused, wasn't sure what was going on. Tell him what you believe, Captain. About why I make my visitors face death in this ready room. About why you can lose your wife and still dream of the future. Kirk turned to Tiberius. I believe that the closer we get to dying, the more we try to hang on. To fulfill every moment, just to taste whatever there is in the universe that we can, because... Tiberius finished the thought. Because there is never enough time. Tiberius held out his hand. In a universe where existence was so precious, love so fragile, how could there be time to waste on hate? Kirk took his counterpart's hand. Tiberius said to him, You have a child waiting for you. Kirk nodded. And you have a universe. A child. The stars. Two ends of the same path, joined by a journey. No difference now between a man and his reflection. Radisson interrupted the silence. I'll let Picard know you're both ready to move on. In his quarters on the Enterprise, Kirk stood alone by the viewport, gazing at the stars above Conus. So many stars, they took his breath away. It was Spock and McCoy, the constants in his life. But in McCoy's arms, wrapped in swaddling, someone new, whose alert dark eyes were familiar, seeking his. Joseph. He's grown. But Bones, he was asleep in a stasis coma, wasn't he? McCoy smiled. That's what we thought at first. But if I had to guess, and I do, I'd say it was his own natural response to stress. Other than that, we just don't know how much of what he is what he's supposed to be, and how much is, well, something else. So, my child could be a monster? Kirk immediately hated himself for using that foul word. What if Telani had heard him say it? He froze as he remembered his loss. Jim, maybe Joseph is something that was never meant to be. But maybe for him, he's perfect. Joseph had Telani's eyes, but his skin was deep red, his face ringed by projections of bone, his skull ridged like a Klingon's, but all the way across his scalp. But this baby was part of him, part of her, intermingled in perfect love. The baby gurgled up at him. McCoy chuckled. Look at that, Jim. He just smiled at you. Spock observed gravely. Doctor, at that age, it is most likely gas. McCoy frowned. Spock, ask me if I knew you were going to say that. Kirk looked down at the child, willing himself to see past its features, to see into those eyes and find the soul within. Kirk studied that small hand, so fragile, so delicate. If he's part Romulan, Spock, that means he's part Vulcan, too, doesn't it? Indeed. He certainly has the grip of a Vulcan. It will not be difficult to teach him the Kafka disciplines. McCoy cooed. Ooh, hear that, Joseph? Uncle Spock's going to teach you the nerve pinch. For long moments, as he stared at his child, Kirk didn't know what was happening to him. He was racked by bitter sorrow that Telani had left him, never to know this moment. But somewhere at his core, he felt the first whispers of joy that he himself was here in this moment to see their child. Kirk looked up, blinked tears from his eyes, realized that McCoy held the child in outstretched arms. Gently, Kirk reached out with fear and hope and sorrow and joy, and for the first time took his child in his arms. McCoy turned to Spock. Come on, Spock. We should let these two get acquainted. It's a long trip back to Chow. Spock raised an eyebrow. Captain, is that where we should inform Captain Picard you wish to go? Yes, Spock. Whatever else he felt, Kirk knew he needed to take Joseph to the house he had built, to show him the clearing and the place where his parents were married. Joseph and I are going home, for now. McCoy couldn't help but ask. And later? Kirk didn't have an answer. He cradled Joseph carefully, tentatively, as they went to the viewport. The stars streamed by in all their colors, and safe in his father's arms, Joseph's perfect hands reached out to them, as if he meant to touch them all, and knew someday he would.
Star Trek Preserver was written by William Shatner, with Judith and Garfield Reeves-Stevens, and read by William Shatner. It was abridged for audio by George Truitt. It was recorded at Mark Rao Recording in Burbank, California. Computer voice was read by Deborah Gregory. Digital editing by Steven Strassman. Sound design, production, mix, and mastering by Gary Fink. Original music was composed by Carl Schurtz, Eve Buglerian, Carl Sharif, Richard Emmett, and Sam McKelly. The associate producer was Will Carlino. Star Trek Preserver was directed and produced by Linda Ross of One Louder. This has been a Simon & Schuster audio presentation.